There's a little idea that a friend of mine shared with me 10 years ago when I was 20 years old, and I would like to share it with you because I truly believe it could make the world a better place. So 10 years ago, my friend sat down with me and asked me, Davide, what do you think is love? How do you define love? And because I was 20 years old and I had one or two relationships before, I didn't really have a good answer for that. I was just a young and dumb kid. So he told me, I think love means to not calculate. And first I didn't really understand what he meant, but he said, you don't calculate all the money and every penny you are using in or for a relationship. And at that time, it was the first time that somebody told it to me like that. And it might sound obvious to many people, but at the same time, I see and I believe that many people don't act in this way all the time. Oftentimes in relationships, people split things 50-50. And of course, there are legitimate reasons to do that. And I don't mean this idea in an extreme way to never calculate anything, but just to be generous. And to be generous as a man, and this might be a little bit traditional. And I don't mean it in a patriarchic way, but it just means for me as a man to make my girlfriend happy with beautiful experiences, even if it's just a flower or a nice dinner that I would like to invite her for. And for me, this idea of spending money for a girlfriend or for my future spouse has sticked with me for the last 10 years. And it also has sticked with me for my family and for my best friends. So whenever I have the chance to make my best friend or my mother or my sister or my father happy with a nice experience, I just try to pay for it. And I really don't mean this in the way that you have to start paying the rent or all the holidays for your girlfriend or for your boyfriend. I just mean the general intention of when you're thinking about your loved ones and money, that you just don't calculate too much about it. And I mean, we know from science that materialism doesn't really make you happier. So if you spend $50 or $100 for a nice dinner with your best friend instead on some new gadget that you could use, the experience with the people that are really important to you will be much more valuable and make you much happier in the long run. And now you could also think, but if I'm spending my money all the time, does the other person also have to spend money? And in the end, of course, I think it's giving and receiving, but just not having your eye on the spot with every penny all the time. Of course, you can also expect that your partner or your best friend will make you a present too sometime or buy you a beer sometime too. It's just the idea of making that other person for a little moment happy to share a nice experience with you instead of watching your wallet all the time. I'm guessing that this idea comes partly from the Asian culture because my mother is Taiwanese and the friend I told you about, he's also Taiwanese. And I think there are many parts in the world where people do this. I can also see it here in Switzerland. The few best friends that I have, and I don't know why, but they have this in them too. And whenever we go out, my friend, they would just go get a beer without asking me at the bar and then bring it to me, and I would do the same. And there are no questions asked and no talking about money. It's just, I'll bring you a beer, you bring me a beer, etc. And one viewpoint is also, I am a high believer in saving money too. I believe that life doesn't need too many materialistic things and you should save as much money as you can. But just when you're with friends and family and your loved one, spend the money you saved for them. I guess love can be really complicated and hard sometimes, but this is a general rule that I think that is always good, especially when you have a fight or there are hard times, that you just remember it's not about the money. I mean, if you look at the divorce rate and the people who are fighting for years over money, this is just a catastrophe, how much money and energy and happiness is being lost there. And I really hope that I don't find myself one day in a divorce where I look at every penny that has to be divided, etc. But that is just a general rule of thumb that both are going to be happy, because many of us are lucky to live in a healthy and stable society, which will always have enough income, and we will never die because we don't have enough money or anything like that. And here's just a little bit more science to this whole idea. There are experiments where you prime people with the idea of money first, and then when you give the money and they meet a stranger, they tell the people to split up their money, to share their money. And people who are being primed with thinking more about money in general tend to keep more money for themselves. And people who are primed with anything else, they tend to give even more money, or maybe half of it, but not being greedy. So in the end, that means the more we humans think about money, the more greedy we become. And from an evolutionary perspective, it's just because we try to save resources. Our brain tries to save resources, but we have to remember we have enough resources, and we're not going to die just because we spend the money for dinner with our girlfriend. So I personally believe love is not a magical thing that just happens like that, but it's a thing that takes time and a lot of effort from you and the other person to put your love and the energy into that relationship, and it grows over time. So the next time you go buy some food or grab a coffee for yourself, just think of your best friend or your spouse or girlfriend and ask them if they want a coffee or whatever you're going to buy too. Speaking of giving some love, if you want to support me, you can use the link in the video description and click on my Patreon account. There you could, if you wanted, to support me with $1 per month, because I would like to try to make YouTube my job maybe one day. And if you donated $1 per month, that would just be $12 a year. You can think about that if you like. Also, there are book links in the video description down below for books that I recommend, also on topics like love. If you use one of those links, I will receive a small commission. Okay, that was it for today, and hopefully you can lead a life full of love.